Hello, I'd like to welcome everybody tonight and we'll get the meeting started. We do want to stay very much on schedule and finish up a little bit after 8 o'clock. And we always like to, start these things on time. It's exciting to see so many people here. I'll say that. Partly because this is, I've been locked in my place like for a year. So it's exciting to see any people, but particularly at what we think is a very important meeting. Yeah, this is a meeting of the Oakmont Democratic Club, but everybody is welcome, whether you're a Democrat or not. We do encourage people to join the club, as I mentioned earlier. We are a chartered club, which means we are a part of the National Democratic Party, the California State Party, and the Sonoma County Democratic Party. And I'd like to announce two people, well, actually one person who's here who's a member of the board, and we'll say some words a little bit later. Rocio Rodriguez over there, I'll have her wave. And she is the second vice chairperson of the Central Committee and is actually the liaison to our club. And I'd like to also recognize the board members from the Oakmont Democratic Club, if they could stand wherever they might be. And I see, could the board members follow directions and please stand? I see Kate and Carol. Marcia's there. She's not standing though. Chris is there. And Sue is there. She did stand and then she sat down. We'll have some announcements also at the end, but one of the things I do want to say that I've been amazed. We've lived in Oakmont a little over 4 years now. There are a lot of different groups here who are really working for the community good. And it's exciting to see the numbers of different organizations and groups that are involved. And I'd like to at least, we'll have announcements later, but I would like to at least recognize some of the folks who are here. There's a new group, Stand for Justice, that's focused on dealing with racial injustice in our country. And it's a new group that's just started meeting. There's the Persisters group that sent out thousands and thousands of postcards in the last election, tens of thousands of postcards in the last election. There are folks from the sister district, which worked hard to try to flip state level offices in key battleground states. And that is so important if we're to have a good democracy in this country, particularly around the issue of gerrymandering. And there's also a progressive club that will start meeting again this fall, that are some of us that like to push the Democratic Party to get a little more progressive. And so again, there's some really good groups here, and that's an exciting piece. Tonight, we're going to focus on the 2 recalls. I'm one of the persons, so I'll say this, a decade ago, I could not have imagined that we would be in the situation we are in today. And that might sound like it's an overstatement, but there are 2 things I just could not have imagined. How bad we're doing with our climate. And we learned that soon after we moved to Oakmont and the 2017 fires happened. I know some of you were also welcomed by those type of things. But then the other thing, which is just as scary, is the assault on our democracy. Those who want to take away people's right to vote. And I say right to vote, right? It's something many people have fought for over the years. And I remember a meeting I was in with a Republican congressman some years ago who seemed to think that the Constitution, as it was written, was a perfect document. And as you might recall, most of the people in this room were not allowed to vote, right? Okay. And even some of the men probably wouldn't be able to vote if you didn't own property, right? So again, we need to make it a more perfect union. And part of that, I think, is fighting the effort and the recall. So we will first have that addressed. And then there's a second recall that's going on that I mean, I know most of you are familiar with the recall of Newsom. There are no perfect politicians. Let's be real clear about that. I think the governor should have his laundry done in a different place, and definitely not French laundries, okay? That being said, the effort to throw the governor out is something to take us back to a time we don't want to be in. And that's something we need to, I think, fight, and we plan to fight that in a very aggressive way, particularly here at Oakmont. The second is, again, I wouldn't necessarily agree with the district attorney on every issue, and I'm not that familiar with that office in some ways. But what I am aware of is Gallagher, who's trying to throw her out. What I object to is when incredibly rich people in our politics, whether they're from the right or the left, try to basically buy elections. And where I'm more familiar actually with the Gallagher family is their efforts to overthrow some of the environmental steps our city and members of our county have taken, whether that be mass transit or being more electric. And basically they have the money and they think they can do what they want. I don't think that's correct in a democracy. And Jill will talk about her own work, but I think it is important that we know that we fight to make sure everybody gets to vote and that there's more equality. I want to introduce now Val Henshaw, and I'll say a word about Val before she presents. I met Val a couple years ago. What I became aware of is she is one of the hardest working, most active people in this county, helping to fight to make sure there's affordable housing, helping to fight to make sure that people have the health care they need, and also fighting to make sure that there is a strong representative Democratic Party. I can be very critical of the Democratic Party because I think, frankly, there's some special interests that ain't so good. But I also am aware there are people like Val who are fighting to make it a more Democratic Party. And part of that is her incredible work around making sure we have a strong effort in this county. So with that, let me introduce Val Henshaw.
Tom, thank you very much for that very warm introduction. And I am so pleased to be back here at Oakmont again in person. Thank you so much for showing up. It's wonderful to see everyone here. And that means it tells me that you're healthy, you're well, you're engaged, and you're ready to help us fight another battle, another day. I know you guys thought you were going to get this year off, but guess what, folks? Here we are. So let me get started, and I'll try to run through this as quickly as possible and allow time for questions. And I know that Jill will be here to speak after me. So next slide, please. So do you recognize any of these names? One of these could be your next governor if we don't get out and do the work we need to do. Larry Elder. He's a conservative radio host. He's polling at 16% and tops the field of these four up here. So I'm just going to put that up there and let you think about that for a second. And if you don't think that's real, let me stroll down memory lane and remind you of a few folks that we've wished we didn't elect. Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. We didn't elect this one, but Governor Jesse Ventura of Minnesota, who was a former professional wrestler. President George Bush, twice. And need I remind everybody in this room about the previous occupant of the White House, who shall go unnamed. So let's not assume that we are not going to have a problem. Let's assume that we are going to get out there and do what we need to do to take this recall and put it where the sun don't shine and send those Republicans back home. Pardon my French, but that's really how I feel about this. Next slide. Let's talk briefly about our agenda. We'll talk briefly about the Democratic Party and its role, a little bit about the Recall 101. And if there's time, we'll touch briefly on Newsom's record. We can all pick and, have some bones to pick, like Tom said, that we don't necessarily agree with everything he's done, but he sure does beat the alternative. Am I right? Yeah. Thank you. Then we'll talk about how you can take action and how you can get involved. And thank you for getting up there in front of me. Go ahead, next slide. The Democratic Party. As the nation's largest state Democratic Party, the California Democratic Party is taking a stand to unequivocally, I had to practice that word 3 times because I wanted to add another syllable, unequivocally oppose the Republican attempt to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. The California Democratic Party is in contact with Stop the Recall, the Republican recall campaign, to execute a coordinated campaign throughout the state. The Sonoma County Democratic Party is leading efforts locally in Sonoma County to fight this recall. We are what is designated as a community hub, where we work collaboratively and closely with the state party that provides resources and opportunities for events to get out the vote, to inform, to educate the voters, and to match the percentage of turnout we had in 2020. Do you all know what our turnout was in 2020 in Sonoma County? It was the highest in the state at 94%. Can we do it again? All right, I love that. Next slide, please. So what's this recall all about? Who's behind it? This is the latest in 6th Republican attempt to recall Governor Newsom. The first one started 3 months after he got into office. So you know they're really a serious bunch. California has one of the lowest recall thresholds in the country, and a judge granted unprecedented 4-month extension last year to qualify signatures due to the pandemic. Otherwise, they probably would not have qualified for the ballot. But here we are. The National Republicans have found their latest scheme to rile up the Trump base to try to stop California's efforts to fight the pandemic. Recalling Governor Gavin Newsom is what turns these guys on. Rather than supporting California's governor recovery from the pandemic, Republicans are choosing to shift the focus and attention away from those who need it most, fueled by a partisan Republican coalition of anti-maskers, anti-vaxxers, anti-immigrant, QAnon conspiracy theorists, and Trump supporters. The recall is funded by the RNC and many national Republicans. The San Francisco Chronicle wrote recently that the recall is bankrolled by wealthy mega donors and national Republicans, with the Republican National Committee giving $250,000 to help the effort qualify. Instead of fighting COVID-19, national Republicans are attacking Californians. In fact, this recall is estimated to cost California taxpayers at least $215 million. And it could go as high as it cost last year, $400 million because of the pandemic. So think about all the money that could be spent, some worthy causes helping out people in this pandemic. And if that doesn't get you mad, I don't know what does. So we know that a Republican governor in Sacramento could have long-term consequences for Californians, especially as we are just getting back on our feet from COVID. And yes, we do have a surge in the pandemic in some hot spots. But when we look at 3 states that have 40% of the current rise in cases nationally, those 3 states are all governed by Republicans. So just think about where California would be now if we had a Republican in office. Next slide, please. So given the state's increasing Democratic tilt, recalls are essentially the California GOP's only viable path to get a Republican into the governor's office. The state has become simply too Democratic for a Republican to beat a Democrat in the regularly scheduled election with the top 2 primary. Democratic voters outnumber Republican voters 46 to 24%, with the majority of independents leaning Democratic. So a recall election is the only time that a non-incumbent Republican was elected governor of California since 1992. But 2021 is not 2003. And it's not just that the state's electorate has gotten exponentially more Democratic. In 2003, the Democratic partisan advantage was plus 5% versus today, which is at 22. So Governor Newsom is in a vastly different position than former Governor Davis. But let's not take anything for granted and get complacent. And you'll hear me repeat this. But back in 2018, Governor Newsom was elected with almost 62% of the vote. Support for the recall in public polls registers today at 43%. The electorate that voted for Trump in 2020 and Newsom's GOP opponent gained 36%. So basically, the supporters of the recall are almost entirely Republican, and there simply aren't enough Republicans in the state to get recall proponents to 50%, unless Dems don't show up. By contrast, in 2003, public polling showed that a majority of voters supported recalling Davis throughout the campaign. Democrats in both California and across the country are united behind Governor Newsom. But again, we cannot take anything for granted or be complacent. Next slide, please. Now, I could run through a rather lengthy list of Governor Newsom's accomplishments and his leadership through the pandemic. But I think you can see basically that while we've all suffered to some degree through the long and hard last year and a half, businesses have suffered, families have lost loved ones, schools have closed, and on and on. I think that anybody in this room would dare to say that had it not been for Governor Newsom's leadership, we would be in worse shape than we are today. So I will just just want to say again that the consequences of a successful recall amid a global pandemic, an economic recession, and ongoing with racial injustices and climate crisis could be deathly serious for Californians. Next slide, please. Now, these are the things that won't make the news because wildfires, COVID crisis, the drought, homelessness, and rising crime are what make the headlines in California. But these are just some of the things that the governor has taken on. Just last week, he signed a bill that will invest $6 billion in broadband internet for rural areas and inner cities. Last week, he was also in Sebastopol, where he held a press conference and signed another bill investing $12 billion to support homelessness and wraparound services. But those are things that don't make the headlines. People see homeless people out on the street. They fear because COVID is still rising. They don't like the mask mandates. You know, pick your poison, and there's plenty of reason to have fear. And that's what people focus on. And when they think that the guy at the top is not able to fix it all, they're going to want somebody else. So it really is up to us to say, no, we need to stand up and show up. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the election itself. Ballots will be mailed out in just 3.5 weeks, August 16th. They will be mailed out to every active registered voter in the state of California. I just had a conversation with, or some email exchange with our registrar of voters, Diva Proto, just to make sure I had the latest information. So election day is September 14th. There will be drop boxes for your ballots located throughout the county, as we're become accustomed to in previous elections. And there will be polling places, limited as they are, open on election day. So that information will be shared in your ballot, and I'm sure widely spread through the media as well as online. And we will make sure to amplify the message and the information to get it out to everybody. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the recall. Yes, ma'am. All voters will receive a mail-in ballot, regardless of your status. Thank you. So let's look at the ballot itself. Now, in most of the state, there will be 2 questions on the ballot. Sonoma County is an exception because we have 2 recalls to deal with, but I'm going to address only the governor's recall. The first question will be, should Governor Gavin Newsom be recalled? And you have 2 choices to answer, yes or no. How are you going to vote? No. I'm sorry? No. Please tell me, what are you going to vote? No. Thank you. I was getting worried. So question 2, you can move on. You don't need to even answer this one. But if you're, curious, who should succeed him if he's recalled? You saw the top of the list of some 41 candidates that I believe have now qualified to take over this spot should we miss this recall. So what happens? Question one, if 50% or more vote yes to question one, we are screwed. And then we get to find out who got the top vote in question two. Now, mind you, that person does not have to get 50% or more of the vote. He or she only has to get the most out of the whole pool. So the winner may only get 15 or 20%, and he or she is declared governor. Okay, so back to question one. Vote what? Thank you. Next slide, please. Let's talk about taking action. Here's something that everybody in this room could do. We know from experience and data that when we're talking with voters about the election, peer-to-peer conversations are most effective. You may ignore a stranger, but you won't ignore your friends and maybe your family. I don't know. I'm not sure about talking politics with family if they're on the other team. So I leave that guy up to you guys. But you guys got friends who may or may not be as familiar and informed as you all in this audience about this recall election coming up. So those conversations can be productive, but you may have an easier time connecting with them on the issues that matter most. So what you could do, next slide, please. You could start by making a list of 5 people that you want to reach out to. People that, maybe just aren't paying as much attention. There's something about an election, but isn't that next year? Isn't it midterms or something coming up? Didn't we just have one? So these are the folks that you could reach out to and say, hey, did you know there's an election coming up September 14th? Did you know your ballot's coming in the mail around the middle of August? Do you know what you need to do? You need to fill it out, vote no, and turn it back in. But think about, creating a list of 5 people. How do you normally communicate with them? Maybe by email, maybe by text, maybe have a conversation over breakfast or lunch or whatever. But just reach out the way you would normally talk to them and just ask them if they want to know about the recall. Next slide, please. So here's some simple messages that you could text or put it in your own voice. This one I like at the bottom. There's currently an attempt by Republicans to recall Governor Newsom, but as Governor Newsom has delivered for working families, provided direct relief to individuals, passed the strongest eviction protections in the country, I'm fighting back against the Republicans and standing with Governor Newsom. And there's a link to the campaign, stoptherepublicanrecall.com, that people could sign up if they wish to donate. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. But that's just one of the 3 kinds of messages that could sit. If you want to be a little bolder, there's an attempt by the Republicans to recall Newsom, led by a coalition of blah, 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 right? So put it in your own voice, make it simple. Let it start a conversation with people that you know. Those are the people that are likely to listen to you and to say, oh yeah, I better get my ballot in the mail. Okay. Next slide, please. Other ways to get involved. You can volunteer, you can text, you can donate directly with the recall campaign at stoptherepublicanrecall.com. They have a massive texting program going on. They've been doing it since February. If that's your jam, sign up there. Now, for those of you who would like to help out locally, that means with the Sonoma County Dems, those of you who have a phone with a camera and would like to be a little adventurous and sign up now, take your phone out. And if you know about the QR codes, that little square with the squigglies down in the bottom right-hand side of the screen. It says scan me. Focus your camera on that square. Hold it for about a second or two. You can do it at home too through the Zoom machine. And once your camera shows a little link, you can just click on that link, and that takes you to the Sonoma County Democratic Party volunteer opportunities. I'm going to ask Rocio to click on the blue link on the screen, that one, thank you. And this is what you'll see. So some of you may not have the capacity to read a QR code in your phones because there may be a setting you haven't elected to do. So not to worry, we also have hard copy, old style volunteer sign-up sheets that Rocio is going to be walking around through the room, so you can't get away because you don't know how to do this. Okay, but for those who like to do the technically, so Rocio, if you would please click on the first stop the Republican recall, and that brings up a volunteer opportunity just for Oakmonters. Actually, it's not going to be just for Oakmonters. We're going to gather every Democrat we can find to canvass with the Sonoma County Democratic Party and the Oakmont Democratic Club on August 14th here in Oakmont. We still have some details to work out, but you can reserve your spot now. Would you scroll down a little bit? And just so those who are unfamiliar, you can click on that little sign up button down at the bottom. Scroll down some more. Click on that. There you go, right there. And then you can fill in your information, sign up right here and now, and you're done. And we will send you a reminder email and updated information as it becomes available. So that's one way to sign up and help us. Can you get back out of that? I just wanted to show that there are other volunteer opportunities besides canvassing. We have postcarding going on. We've had a postcarding project going on for the last 2 weeks. We have a goal to send out 10,000 postcards in Sonoma County to Sonoma County voters. So far, I have 6,000 addresses already committed. Who's going to help me get the rest of the 4,000 voter addresses out? Tom? Chris? Who else? Come on, let me see some hands. Fantastic. So click on this, click on the link again, please. And scroll down to the bottom and click on that bottom one. That's all about our postcard campaign. That'll give you all the information you need. We have a wonderful volunteer coordinator who will make sure that you get all the addresses that you can handle. Okay, so all you need to do is to sign up. So those are just two of the opportunities that we have going right at this moment. Again, we really need you to come out and help mobilize our voters, educate, inform, talk to them, and whatever you can do to help contribute to defeating this recall, we will be greatly appreciated. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak with you, and I look forward to working with you on this recall.
Thank you, Val. My hope would be that Oakmonters could send out at least 1,000 cards. That doesn't seem like that many to me. And so again, we'd encourage you to sign up, maybe 2,000 cards. I mean, we should get some real numbers here. So again, I would encourage you to sign up and join us, and also join us on August 14th as we actually walk the neighborhood. I'm also impressed by all of you who actually know what a QR is and were able to scan. I say that, as some of you know, as a proud owner of a flip phone. So, so again, Oakmonters always amaze me, I must say. So again, we were talking a little bit earlier about how important it is to defeat the second recall, which is essentially a revenge recall, right? And I don't know how much of it Jill wants to go into, but one of the things I'm aware of is that when you go after Gallagher for leaving for one of his companies leaving a bunch of seniors during a fire, That's pretty outrageous. And my understanding is he had to pay, his company had to pay $500,000 in penalties because of what his company did. So what's he do? He tries to recall the district attorney that held him accountable. I mentioned a little bit earlier how I feel about him as far as the environment. And then, of course, he wants to put another 1,000 seniors in a fire zone next to Oakmont. So, when we're walking on the 17th or on the 14th of August, we want to remind Oakmonters of that, as well as what's going on with the governor. So it's my pleasure to introduce the district attorney for Sonoma County. Jill, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's nice to be here again. I've been here before, and I know I've met a lot of you on prior occasions. I was talking to Steve Jackson tonight at 5 on KSRO, and he asked me about my background and all of this. And I've been a prosecutor in this county since 1990. I don't know if you all know that. Came here in 1990 after the Loma Prieta earthquake, decided to take my chances with an apple tree falling on my head instead of a giant skyscraper in downtown Oakland. And with the exception of a few years, I've been in the DA's office ever since. So lucky to be elected by votes from many of you in 2010 and take office in 2011. So I'm on year 11, and my hope is that I will complete year 11 and year 12 before I retire. And I'll appreciate your hope and your help in getting there. So a couple of things I want to talk to you about, and then Maddie Hirschfield is here. Maddie is one of the leaders of the campaign, No on Recall. I want to make clear, I'm not running the campaign. I decided to retire in good part because I was tired of asking people to vote for me, to be perfectly honest with you. I felt it was time for somebody else to step up, and there is an outstanding candidate out there that I hope you'll get a chance to meet very soon. Her name is Carla Rodriguez, and I hope you'll invite her out to speak to you at some point. But this campaign has been mounted by friends and associates and just people who plain don't like Bill Gallagher. It's not me, it is them running the campaign. I want to be really clear about that, as well as my incredible appreciation for all that they're doing. Because honestly, when this all started, I wanted to just curl up in a ball and say, okay, I'm done. It's humiliating. I don't know if you've heard the ads or read any of the trash that's come in your mailboxes to see. I'm so glad my parents are gone, because these lies are just unbelievable. So Maddie's going to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about what's great. And what's great is what's going on in the DA's office. In fact, Julie, I don't know where she is now, from there, right under my nose. I didn't get dinner, so I'm a little, we were just out here. I don't know how many of you came out. I think I saw Valerie. She was one of our wonderful volunteers there. Yep. Kate was out there. Pardon me? 450 people. We gave away swag bags to people who drove up to the Burger Center, all kinds of resources for seniors, whistles, flashlights. And we actually drove around the neighborhoods too and gave bags out to people who couldn't go out. That's just an example of what we enjoyed doing, the outreach, the interaction with people, particularly seniors. I've made protecting seniors a priority during my administration. We have dedicated prosecutors, investigators, and advocates who deal with crimes against seniors, and we've had incredible success moving the cases through the courthouse quickly and getting outstanding results. I'm also proud of our Family Justice Center. We're going to celebrate our 10th anniversary this year. Many of you have been to the center or know about it. I know I've been out here talking about it a lot. Wraparound services for victims of family violence, sexual assault, elder abuse, and child abuse. We have served thousands of clients and turned them from victims into survivors, into thriving members in the community. Really proud of that. A lot of people, and including this man, make a big deal out of conviction rates. And in fact, he's calling me a hypocrite because I'm not putting my conviction rates out there. Here's the deal. The world is changing and has changed very much in the world of criminal justice. Right now, it's not simply about how many people do you put in jail. It's about how many people do you keep from coming back into the system? How many people do you help address the reason they came into the system in the first place? And what are you going to do to reduce the cost to the public for the criminal justice system? We're spending too much money incarcerating and not enough money rehabilitating and helping people on the upstream side to keep from getting pulled into the system. So we do send people away. Just yesterday, we had a serial child molester was sentenced to 30 years to life in state prison. So you use a gun, you molest children, you commit crimes of violence, we're going to come after you aggressively and seek significant sentences. But so many other crimes have been decriminalized, number one, such as drugs, or we're looking at the causes of the commission of the crimes and then redirecting the offenders. We have treatment courts for people with drug abuse issues, mental health issues, alcohol issues. We're trying to help them address the issues so that they won't commit crimes anymore. I'm very worried about drunk drivers. So everybody here who's drinking tonight, if you're jumping in a car, just make sure you're safe to drive. We have way too much drunk driving happening in Sonoma County, particularly out here on some of these roads like Highway 12. But these are just some of the things that I've prioritized. And I'm really proud of the work that we're doing with our other partners in the justice system, public defender, probation, everybody. Law enforcement's changing. One of the things I talked to Steve Jackson about was police oversight. I support it. It's a great idea, but let's don't forget what police officers do every day. When we're running away for our lives, scared to death of the danger, they're running right into it. They're there to protect and serve us. We should hold them responsible, but we should also respect and appreciate the hard work that they do every day as well. And so anyway, I'm talking a lot. I mostly just wanted to come out and tell you I'm still here. I hope to be out here again in the future into next year before I retire. I hope you'll all come to my retirement party. It'll be December 2022. There will be an election next June for the next district attorney. I hope you'll help me get the message out. I'm not running for another term. I was on my way out when this insanity began, okay? And with regard to the lawsuit that apparently resulted in this recall, it's not just $500,000 that he paid, because a lot of people think it's a drop in the bucket. I don't disagree with that. I have a 5-year order in place, and that order comes with a monitor. So that company is required to put an appropriate safety plan into place and follow through on it. And they've got a monitor checking on them. And if they don't do it right, they come back to court and they face further penalties. To me, that was more important than any amount of money in the bank. So I'm proud of that work that we did with the Attorney General, who is not subject to recall, unfortunately. I got to run this one on my own. But I want to answer any questions you have about the criminal justice system. I see Hugh Helm is here. I want to thank you for your letter to the editor. It was, it was a little hard to read the beginning part of it, but I appreciate the support. And, Hugh makes a great point, which is it looks like the DA basically is walking lockstep with the cops. And honestly, it's not true. First of all, I have to do the investigations that I do on officer-involved fatalities. That's my job. If I don't do it and the AG won't do it, then it doesn't get done. Second of all, there is a lot of accountability of law enforcement. You may have read that I actually was one of the first DAs to indict a police officer for the death of another individual in the course of his duties. Charlie Blount is facing manslaughter charges right now after he was indicted. We have other officers we've been prosecuting. We have one who I think is coming up for sentencing next week for an assault that he committed on a neighbor. So we're doing what we can do despite what appearances may be. But I tell you, as I know I've told Hugh on many occasions, you got a problem, you get in touch with me. You're welcome to call me. You're welcome to email me. You can show up at my office, but it's a long drive. And I'm more than happy to either sit down with you, speak to you, write back to you, answer whatever your concerns are, and answer any questions that you might have, because I work for you and I appreciate the job. And I hope that I'm doing the job that you elected me to do. And I will continue to do my level best as long as I serve as your district attorney. So if you have any questions for me, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I can turn it over to Maddie to talk about the campaign. Any questions at all? This is unusual. Yes, sir. Do I have any requests? Oh, you know what, but that's a great question, because that was what I was talking to Steve Jackson about tonight. You may have seen the documentary that was up on KRCB, I don't know, 3 seconds in October. Here's what I told Steve Jackson. Back then, the way the law was written, I believed I did the right thing based on what I knew and what the law was. The law has changed. The law has changed since then. And now the law is written so that it's not reasonable, it's necessary action on the part of the officer. And that's a big sea change, which is why now we've indicted Charlie Blount. So if you ask me if, God forbid, Andy Lopez was shot today, would I have reached the same conclusion as I did in 2014? My answer is no, absolutely not, because the law has changed. Another thing that's changed is officers wear body cameras. They didn't have body cameras then. We had to go based upon eyewitness statements. We didn't have all of the high-tech stuff we have now where everybody's got cameras. We can go and collect your camera footage. The officer has a camera. We had to go based upon what the witnesses had to say at the time. So I don't have regrets. I have sorrow. And I was sorry from when it began. And I remember talking to my mom, and she couldn't believe that an officer would kill a child. And I was trying to explain, he didn't know it was a child. He saw who he thought was a young adult, 5'3". He saw what he believed to be a weapon being tilted toward him. And he reasonably believed that he was an imminent threat of great bodily injury or harm. And based upon what I had, I made the decision that I did. And I asked the AG to take the case. She refused. It was Kamala Harris at the time. The Civil Rights Division looked at it. They said there's no civil rights violation here. So at the end of the day, I had to make the hard call. And that's what the job's all about. You have to make the decision. And sometimes it's not one you want to make, but that's what you've been elected to do. So that's the best way I can answer your question, sir. Any, yes.
We've asked you to use the mic partly because there are some people on Zoom, and this way they get to hear the question too.
Thank you very much. I'd like to follow up with the Andy Lopez case. Having seen the 3 seconds. Is that better?
Yeah.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Having seen 3 seconds film twice, I was absolutely devastated to see how the police department conducted the investigation of Deputy Gelhaus. He was treated as, after conferring with the union rep and an attorney for 4 hours or 6 hours, he then went to the police department to offer his testimony. And he was assured when he got there that he was considered to be the victim. This is just, it makes my blood turn cold. There is new information, I think. And I wonder, you said at the time, you said, there's no reason to pursue this at this time. I think there is new information. I think it warrants reopening this case. Will you consider doing it?
Well, there are statute of limitations that apply to these crimes, and most of those statute of limitations have run that prohibit me from bringing criminal charges. Additionally, nobody's presented me with any information to review to reopen the case. As there's a civil case that occurred. Things were said during the course of the civil case that may or may not be available for review at this time. So, if somebody came to me and said, here's some new evidence, which nobody has done, and take a look at it, yes, I will take a look at it. The process used by the police department is predicated upon certain police officer rights. It's not something that I dictated or that anybody said was appropriate. I do ask you to take into consideration the police officer had the right not to speak at all, just like anybody else who's being investigated for a potential crime. You can invoke your right to remain silent. You can refuse to answer the questions. And so The process of allowing the officer to speak with representatives before he spoke to the investigating officers enabled them to at least get a statement from him. And that's the process that's used throughout the state. And there's nothing that I can do about that.
One more question and then we'll kind of.
Hi, Jill. Is it true that Gallagher actually paid people that were signing up people to sign the recall petition? Was he actually paying them money to do that? Because that's what I read.
Yes, and in fact, if you go and look at the forms he filed, they're called 460 forms, you're going to see the names of a lot of people who made thousands of dollars. And you can just follow the line back to the people standing in front of Target. And what's very interesting is when you look at the 460s, the people making all that money, they don't even live here. And I had a lot of people come up to me and say, yeah, I engaged the guy in front of Target or wherever. And I said, you know, what's this all about? And they were told, I'm getting paid. Just sign the paper, please. And when they questioned the reason they were being asked or being provided to sign, and they said, well, that's not true. And the guy would say, well, you know, so, okay, what else would you like to hear? One lady told me she was told in Rohnert Park that I wanted to raise taxes on small businesses. You know, and another tactic was, here, sign the recall for Newsom. And a lot of people wanted to sign the recall for Newsom. And then they just flipped it over and said, oh, you need to sign here too. So yeah, I had a friend who they were advertising on Craigslist. She called up, she said, how much do you pay? They said $10 a signature. So I know for a fact that he was paying, not personally, but through his campaign was paying people. He's expended, again, I'm going to defer to Maddie on all of this, but I know he's expended probably over $1 million now. Those little flyers in your mailboxes don't come cheap. So I'm going to turn over to Maddie if it's okay. And I want to, again, thank you, encourage you. You know, there are so many things that we do in my office that I'm happy to boast about. And if you have questions, I encourage you to contact me, be happy to answer them. But I want to thank you for listening to me, for considering this recall that Maddie's going to discuss the campaign against. It's been an honor to serve. I hope you give me the honor to finish out my term here in Sonoma County. So thank you all very much.
Yeah, I would like again to thank Jill for coming in the words she had to say. There are a lot of things we need to reform in California, but I think one of the things we need to make sure is that a millionaire doesn't run the county, at least a billionaire, whatever he is. As I introduced Maddie, I do want to say, I know Maddie from her work with unions. And I will say that one of the big issues here is how some of the folks who don't get paid as much are treated in this county. And it's a whole nother topic that we'll probably address this fall, either with the progressives or the Dems. But there's certainly a number of fights to make sure both farm workers, but also people who run the who work in the various hotels and others get decent salaries. But let me introduce Maddie. It's all yours for about 5 or 10 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. Oh God, I don't even know where to start. Listening to Jill, I kept wanting to jump in, but so it's true that Jill is not running this campaign. She has very little to do with it. There are 4 of us on the executive committee. By way of introduction, I have known Jill for about 16 years. I've worked on all of her campaigns, all 3, where she actually ran, so I'm calling this 3.5. And I've never seen anybody more hardworking than Jill Ravitch, who really, really cares about this community. It's a tough job, folks. I mean, it's if you've been doing this for 11 years and you haven't pissed off some people, you're not doing your job. So, however, this guy being pissed off is just totally, I can't even find a word for it. You probably are aware that he and his family have done a lot here to draw us back. They single-handedly held back the continuation of the tax for the SMART train. They have sued the cities of Santa Rosa and Windsor for their all-electric ordinances because it was going to hurt his business. And it's no mistake that only a few weeks after our district attorney held him accountable for leaving vulnerable people to fend for themselves in a firestorm that he launched this campaign. He has spent over $1 million so far, just him. If you look at the information on the recall, he is the only donor. It just makes no sense what he's trying to do. And he's forcing Sonoma County taxpayers to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars for his revenge fest. So the four of us got together. Denny Rosati is working with us. He's in the back of the room there. He's passing out some information. Myself, Terry Price, who's also worked on 2 of Jill's campaigns. And we have a fabulous consultant, Leo Buck, who's doing a great job. So while Jill is my friend, I can say that this really isn't about her. It's about a billionaire trying to control our county. And this is a very, very dangerous precedent to set. So I want him to spend a ton of money and lose. And that's what we plan to do. And it's looking very good for us, but we're working really hard. We will never be able to match him dollar for dollar. But one of our slogans is that he's got money and we've got the truth. So we're working very, very hard to raise money to get the word out there. We've got signs here that you can take with you. We're having an event this Sunday that you're all welcome to come to. I think Denny passed these out. And that's basically it. But I do want to say the questions about Andy Lopez. I went through that whole thing with Jill because she's my friend and I have consulted with her for a long time. I watched her really, really struggle with this. And it's really hard for me to hear people who don't really know what that took for her to do, to bash her for that, or to say she doesn't really care. She cares a lot. And I think what she was trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jill, is that her regret is that the law wasn't different then, that the law did not allow her to hold him accountable. Now the law is different, and that's why she's doing it the way she's doing it. I've spoken to many attorneys, many people who are not big Jill supporters, who are totally against this recall and understand what she did on the Andy Lopez case, and that they know they would have had to do the same thing if they were the DA. So to take a person and make her responsible for that is so wrong and so unfair. My heart bleeds for Andy Lopez and his family, and God, I wish that hadn't happened. That said, Jill did what she could do at the time. So we need your support. We need you to put out signs. We need your money. Again, we will never match him dollar for dollar. We're doing pretty well. So thank you for listening. Thank you for supporting. I don't know anybody that's supporting his side. And also the thing about the signs is he's not going to have signs out. That's a grassroots thing. He's not a grassroots kind of guy. Nobody's going to put a sign up that says recall Jill Ravitch on their lawn. He will pay for those big electric billboards on the freeway that will say terrible things about her because he can afford to. So we got to keep hitting back and keep making sure that he doesn't do this, because if he does it to her, who's next? So let's fight against this recall. I'm willing to take questions if anybody has questions. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
So again, I would invite all of you to participate at whatever level you can. On August 14th, a team of us will be out canvassing here. There are other canvassing opportunities that'll be coming up. I did see 3 no on the recall signs driving over here, and hopefully we'll see a whole bunch more. And again, I think this is the whole question. And I'll connect it to Donald Trump. There are people who want to take our country in a direction that's not good. Some of you know I worked a lot as a community organizer with law enforcement, particularly in Stockton, Sacramento, San Jose. And actually, I was privileged to work with at least 2 chief of police who were very progressive and very thoughtful, but it's very difficult work. And I also worked, a number of my board members in the nonprofit I directed were formerly incarcerated, including my treasurer, who I would trust with all my money. But it is difficult. And part of the thing with modern policing or a modern DA isn't how many people you lock up, but trying to make sure justice happens, right? And sometimes, like the person who's treasurer for my nonprofit spent most of his time from when he was a teenager to mid-30s incarcerated, drug dealing, stuff like that. But John, when he got in front of a good judge, got a good program, got rehabbed, became a counselor for the county. And then he was counseling how people not shoot each other in the city of Stockton, working very closely with actually the police department. So there are things that, if justice is administered properly, it isn't just about locking people up. It's about making sure people become whole again, right? And the same with the police work. Where I want to go with this right now, though, we want to be careful with your time. A really great turnout tonight. We do want to recognize a couple things, and we want to ask a favor of you. Next month, we will meet again. We are starting to meet again. Whatever this is, the fourth Thursday of each month for an hour here at East Rec. We really want you to think with us about what you want to see as far as program and activities over the next year. We've talked about doing some walkathons. We've talked about environmental issues. There is a group that's pushing particularly for oversight of the sheriff to make sure, because there are a lot of issues there. And if you see in the grand jury report on some of the stuff, there are a bunch of issues there. So we would invite you to come next month. We'll follow up on this campaign, but we'll also look at where we go down the road next year as a club. Any questions or comments on anything we've presented so far? Yeah. Okay, so we got two things. The no on the DA are here, but the no on the Republican recall of the governor, they'll be out the first of the month, right? We have a good webpage, and oakmontdem.com is our webpage. So if you go on there, you can get a link to the Sonoma County Democratic Party for the information on this campaign and for all of our activities as well. We also tend to highlight a number of other groups who do some really good work, and I'd like to recognize them and maybe ask them to speak for about 1 minute on some of what they're doing. One of which grew out of the George Floyd killing last year, the murder. And you probably saw some of those folks standing on the corner with signs for quite some time. I'd like to introduce Rob and George because they've started to meet in person. And so Robin, do you want to say just a word?
Thank you, Tom. So Standing for Justice is a new club in Oakmont. We had our first meeting just this last Tuesday. We had 11 people sign up. So, I mean, come, and 2 were on Zoom. So we are really looking to encourage more people to join us as they feel comfortable doing. And our mission is really to do education around racial justice amongst Oakmont residents, and then to also engage in open dialogue and have conversations about hard topics, and also to plug people in to civic actions that are already happening. We don't feel like we need to reinvent the wheel and come up with a lot of actions ourselves. There's lots of things going on around Santa Rosa and Sonoma County, and we'd like to get people plugged into those, just like the Democratic Club is. So I have some information with me here this evening if anybody would like to talk to me afterwards about what we're doing specifically in Standing for Justice. But and I just want to say that our commitment to racial justice includes all sorts of other kinds of issues like housing and economic justice and environmental justice, all education, all of those things have racial components. And so we are addressing many of those things under the umbrella of racial justice.
So second person I want to recognize, one of the areas in which the Republican Party was decades ahead of us was trying to make sure state houses were in their control. And what that led to a decade ago, a little over a decade ago, is that even though there are a fair number of states where more Democrats and independents vote than Republicans, they control a majority of the seats in Congress. And unfortunately, that's probably going to get a bit worse with gerrymandering, right? But there's an organization that is fighting that to make sure that there's a real two-party system, I'll say, in every state. And they're doing some great work. I'm going to introduce Amy to come up and say a few words. And I will also say they set up some very fun activities, as well as some very good work to elect folks. So Amy?
Thanks very much, Tom. So first, I want to thank Tom and the board of the Oakmont Democratic Club for organizing this and bringing us all together finally in person. It's so great to see people. It's yes, applause for that. And I appreciate everybody coming out today. I mean, I know it's been a really tough time and people are kind of burnt out in some ways, but I think the only way to really stay engaged is to be together and to see each other. So Sister District is a national organization that organizes chapters and people primarily in blue districts like ours to partner to sister. It's not a women's group, and not just women candidates, but districts in swing states and red states to flip state legislatures and to try to have better majorities or presence of Democrats in these state legislatures to fight these anti-democratic, anti-choice, anti-reproductive rights, anti-worker rights legislation that the Republicans are trying to push in all these states. So it's a great organization. Our local chapter is relatively new, our Sonoma County East. If you want to sign up or find out more information, you just go to sisterdistrict.com, and when you put your zip code in, it will assign you to our chapter. What I really came was to say that one of the things we want to do is to do well by having fun. And thanks to Barbara Molay, who I think is, I don't know if she's still here, but Barbara started a couple of years ago, Poker for Democracy, which now is a fundraiser for Sister District. And we haven't had one for a couple of years, but I believe we have it in this room. And even if you're not a poker player, it's really fun. You can have a competitive table, but we also have a teaching table, and it's just really a lot of fun, a very social event. So it is, save the date, and it's also on our Facebook page, September 4th, which is Labor Day weekend on Saturday. And I'm sure I'll have another chance next month to send out, to pass out some flyers. Thanks, Tom, for everything.
I'll put in a plug for Poker for Democracy because I'm a rookie novice and I won $40. So I was pretty doggone happy about it. I'm looking for Ken Smith. I think he was the big winner of the night. I don't see him right now. But anyway, so again, there are lots of ways to be involved, but we really would encourage you to join the efforts to block the Republican recall and also to make sure that we do not recall the district attorney. One more person I want to invite is Rocio Rodriguez, who is the second vice chair of the Sonoma County Democratic Party. And she has been a very energetic leader, even though she is, you can see, younger than we are. And I know it was a privilege to be out walking and doing some canvassing with her last weekend, and with a team that she helped put together. So let me introduce her. And she is also the formal liaison to our club. And Rocio, here you go.
Thanks, Tom. And hi to the people in Zoom. This is fun to see a hybrid style of meeting. It's something that I think is going to become really common and really accessible. So great to be a part of one. My name is Rocio Rodriguez, and I am the second vice chair of the Sonoma County Democratic Party. My predecessor right here, Val Henshaw, who I believe a lot of you know, who is still a guide and mentor as I learn the ropes, but I am the new liaison. So I've been in contact with Tom and Chris and with other club leaders to just keep them informed of what the club is doing or the Democratic Party is doing. And they've been informing me as well about the club. Just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Texas. I only moved out here in 2015, left for a few years for grad school and came back But I was engaged with the Democratic Party since the beginning, and the Wine Country Young Democrats. I'm a at-large, I just forgot the title. No, not delegate, just a at-large member in the executive committee. Thank you. So also engaged with one of the clubs, and most recently have been appointed to the county redistricting commission. So staying engaged in whatever way that I can in really meaningful ways, including coming here and getting to meet you all. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Kate, you wanted to jump in here? Kate is the person that keeps our webpage up to date.
Scary thought. So I just wanted to say in regard to the lawn signs, kind of what Val was saying about people who don't even realize this whole recall election is happening for either Newsom or for Jill. The more of those we can put out on the lawns, the more people are going to say, what's that about? Because we really have got to get people out to vote. So please, as you walk out the door, grab a sign. And if we run out, let me know, we'll get some more. Thank you.
So again, we'd like to thank you for attending our first in-person meeting. We do try to keep them to about an hour, a little bit more. And we do want to hear, at our next meeting in particular, what are some themes you want to look at as we get into the upcoming year? Maybe speakers you'd like to see us try to get, et cetera, or campaigns you'd like to have us look at. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending. There's still a lot of good stuff on the counter back there. So please, grab what you want. And please take a sign and join the club if you can. Thank you.